Okay, so online assessments. Let's take a look and see what we get. Now, you're all very well educated and have been doing this for a long time, so I'm not going to spend too much time going over the different types. We've all heard this a lot before, but just to point out the fact that there are different ways to assess different ideas, different things that we can do. So, the difference between formative and summative, we've heard a lot. Formative is the one you want to check and see how things are going. While summative, that's kind of the end of the chapter, end of the unit. You want to make sure that the students have achieved the learning outcomes that they learned, what you wanted them to learn. And that's usually the two that we hear about the most often. And then there's also a different way to look at it, the difference between authentic and traditional assessments, where authentic is more of the students demonstrating knowledge or skills, doing something, creating something, much more active. Whereas the traditional type of assessment is more that demonstration of, knowledge or skill through like a multiple choice test or, some kind of, choice, true, false, something like that. So there is a difference there between those two types as well. So what we're going to do is take a look at each one. I'm going to give a couple examples and then some tools that you can use. And we'll talk about some ideas that go along with all of those. All right, so for formative assessments, a lot of different things that we can do with this, throughout the year, throughout the unit, throughout chapter, whatever it might be. The idea of self-tests or self-assessments for the students to just kind of go through, usually with a checklist or a rubric or something like that. Once they do a draft of an assignment, and then from there can kind of check their work against a task list or a rubric and see how they did, and kind of give themselves feedback, and then maybe have an opportunity to correct their work or, work on that final draft, whatever that might be. The old standby of the think, pair, share, where you have students, you give them a second to brainstorm an answer to a question, pair up with somebody next to them, share their ideas, and then maybe share it out loud. Peer reviews and feedback as well. Polling and surveys are usually pretty quick and easy, especially with the iPad. Every student has a device that they can use to respond to that survey. If anybody remembers the clickers from maybe 10 years ago that we might have had in the classrooms, same basic idea. You can just use the iPad as that function. Exit tickets are another easy one, where you just have some kind of question for the students to answer before they leave. Sometimes it's on their way out the door. People have done this in the past with like little note cards, 3x5 note cards, or a little scrap of paper. Students write something before they leave, or you can do it virtually with Google Forms or something like that. And then the muddiest point is one that I like a lot, where the students actually have to kind of reflect on the lesson or maybe the chapter or something like that, and write about what was the most difficult thing for them, what was the muddiest point or the most unclear thing. And, maybe by the time it's over, they understood it. But if you collect it, that gives you some feedback for what the students may still be struggling on if they're open and honest about their response to that. So I thought that was one that we don't see too often. So I thought I'd throw that in there. Now, as far as Google tools go as an option for a lot of these different things, they all have the built-in feature for collaboration, so students can work together on the same assignment. They can work together on the same document live in real time. They can also share it with you so that you can see it. You might not be the one editing or changing it, but you could see their progress. And, if they collaborate with you on that document or slideshow or whatever it might be, you can see a lot of the changes that they make and when they made those changes and those sorts of things. Discussion boards are a feature of both Sapphire and Google Classroom. So that's something that could be used where the students reply to a teacher prompt, then have to reply to one another. Google Forms is pretty versatile with a lot of the different things that we can do. We can set it up as just one single question and use it as an exit ticket. We could set it up with multiple choice or free response questions and use it as a quick little poll or survey. Students could even write, a muddiest point or reflection in the long answer, the paragraph style response. So that's a tool that you can use for a lot of these different, a lot of these different things. I'm thinking about it now that social distancing might, think pair share might look a little different. We might have to rethink how we do that a little bit. I could imagine classroom being noisy with students, 3 to 6 feet apart, shouting what they're thinking about at their partner there. And then Mentimeter and Poll Everywhere, I tossed in here too as examples, just for polling. They serve that one specific purpose. They're not really a flexible tool in what other things they can do, but the polling aspect is something that they do pretty well. So Mentimeter I like a lot because it's really easy to use. The interface is really simple. You just go to mentimeter.com and you can sign in, create an account for free. And the free account, you're a little limited in what you can do, but for the most part, any kind of simple poll survey or even exit ticket idea, you can do pretty easily in Mentimeter. So you have these 3 little panels, and then you create what they call slides that you can present, show in the front of the classroom. And you have these different question types in here. So you can have a multiple choice question where the students pick one of however many responses. Word clouds are an option where the students' responses, like if they have single words or something like that, that'll come up, and the ones that occur more frequently will be larger in font size. Open-ended questions are just, your standard, you ask a question and the students can type a response. Sliding scales are just like the Likert scales. Students can rank things, and then Q&A, students can also post questions. So that would be a way for them to maybe, pose a question, you review it towards the end of class, almost like we did with Zoom, post your questions in the chat box and we'll go over them at the end kind of thing. So that might be an option too. And then as far as content goes, once you select a question type, you have options based on that question. So for the word cloud, you can choose the number of entries each participant is allowed to respond with. So right now a student could go up to 3 different responses. They have a built-in profanity filter, which is, they will say not 100%, but you can select all, so that would be my option, would be just to make sure they're not cursing in a different language, or even with emojis. And, that is a feature, especially for those free response things, because when you can customize it and you can show the results, and you can toggle that right within the presentation. You could pull this up from your laptop or your iPad to fill your projector screen. But you can toggle between showing and hiding the results. So if it's something like a live vote with a multiple choice or a scale or a ranking, as responses come in, those bars will adjust in real time. So students, if you were showing the results, they could see the bars as they go up and down and that kind of thing. For open-ended responses or Q&A, you can choose how they appear. So as the students respond, they could have the cute little speech bubble kind of pop up on the screen with their text in it. One by one would look almost like a little sticky note that you could kind of scroll through. And then the flowing grid would be an option that you could have where all the student responses kind of come up on the screen and kind of cycle through. So it's a pretty simple little tool. And then for the students, it has the instructions displayed on the little slide. So when you present this, it tells the students just go to this website and use this little 6-digit code, and then it presents them with a question and a place to type in their response. And then that's all there is to it. And then it comes right up. So that's one. Poll Everywhere. The interface is a little different. It's, I think, not as user-friendly. And the features are basically the same as Mentimeter. So the two of them work equally as well. And there are ways that you can embed it within your slideshow. So you could be going through Google Slides and then a Mentimeter poll or a Poll Everywhere poll comes up right here in your slideshow, just for simplicity. But you don't have to do that. So that would be the biggest advantage, I think, to poll everywhere over Mentimeter. But if you don't mind just going to another tab like I did there, I think Mentimeter would be great for that. And then other tools as far as, quick little formative assessments go, things like Kahoot, definitely with the 9th and 10th graders, a little bit younger, Kahoot, just that review game, but even seniors would probably enjoy it once in a while. Quizzes is another option, and summative as well. All of these tools have basically the same functions. You can ask the same question types, and for the students, there is an app for summative where they can go to respond to the questions, and you can do quick questions on the fly where you ask one verbally and then the students respond in text in the app, or you can pre-create these if you want to be ready for the class and the questions that you want to ask ahead of time. Quizzes is one that's really easy to use. You have these different question types, so you can go create a free account. You can create a classroom that the students sign into, and that's how you can track their progress a little bit. If you use Google Classroom, you can link the two together, so the students don't actually have to take that extra step and join, but you can create a quiz with all these different question types in it that the students respond to. So multiple choice checkbox would be multiple selection. And then for quizzes, you could assign the quiz to, let me see if I can go back. You can play it live. So that would be something like Kahoot you would do normally live, where the students would kind of join in your classroom. You would maybe display the questions in the front and they would provide the answers. You can also assign it as homework, where you would give students a link to access it and a due date. So this is when it would close. And then they added newer settings now, so you can choose how many times a student can attempt the quiz, and some other, whether or not students can see a timer for how long they're on the question. You can shuffle the question, the questions themselves, the option for the order. So you have a lot of different things that you can do there. And then students would just, you can post a link on your class page that students could access.
Is there a settings for that, Brian, for you to change those settings? Oh, yeah, now I see it.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
Yep, yeah, it's down here at the bottom.
All right, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And then, one thing I wanted to mention too with Kahoot and quizzes, and maybe summative, I haven't tried it with that one. But those are two, Kahoot and quizzes, I've seen used even remotely. Like when we were out in the last 2 months of the school year, teachers would do a Zoom meeting just like this, and they would pull up Kahoot. And just how, like, I'm kind of multitasking right now. I have my Zoom window open, but I'm also working in my web browser here in Google Slides. Students who joined on Zoom, even on their iPads, if they click on that home button, that doesn't take them out of the Zoom meeting. That allows them to just go on and open other apps. So what they could do is they could still be part of the Zoom meeting, but then they could join the Kahoot, and then from there, you could provide the code or for whatever, for the quizzes or the Kahoot, and then the students could join and participate from their iPad, which I thought was a neat way to kind of make it a little bit more interactive. I saw some teachers do that. And then Quizlet is a little bit different. This was initially made for like flashcards, digital flashcards. That was how they started. And what's nice about this one is if you have the terms and definitions, you can just copy and paste into a list and it'll auto-generate all these flashcards. And the students could create them, or you could create them and share them with the students, either way. But they've added to it since then. So now, in addition to the flashcards, they have the option. So the Learn game, the students go through it and they have to answer every term correctly twice before it marks it as finished. So that idea of kind of mastery and kind of going back and really, do they really know it, rather than just the typical flashcard where they look at it, flip it over, go to the next one. There's a little bit of redundancy there. And then they have some review games that they've kind of created, matching games and, tests. And what it does is it takes those flashcards that you created, and then, their program automatically turns it into these different games and stuff. So students could do their own practice tests with the flashcards. All right. So there, like I said, there's a lot of options for formative, and there's even more than what I have here. I just wanted to pull a couple of things. Now, as far as summative goes.
Hey, Brian, before you go to summative, I have a
Sure.
question. You said there are discussion boards in Sapphire?
Yes.
I've never used the discussion board in Sapphire. How do you do that?
So that would be when you go to your class page. Let's see if I can still get into mine here. Okay. So that would be under your typical add new item button.
Okay.
And then when you go down, they call them forums.
Forum, okay.
And then if you go to add that, you get the same kind of interface that you would have for almost like a Dropbox. So you could give it a title.
Can interact with each other.
Yeah, they can. So you give it a title. And I would suggest maybe doing this for each separate discussion you want them to have, just for your own sanity. Otherwise, they can get kind of crazy. Almost like with Dropbox, we say create one Dropbox and put all your assignments in it.
Right.
For this, I would say create a new forum for every single discussion, like for separate topics.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can add a description, a start and end date, and whether or not parents can see it, and then whether or not students can create topics. And then once you save it, it shows up here.
Okay.
And if you click on it, now you can add a topic. So you get this little text box, so you can, whatever the question might be, and then you can put the prompt in there. And then when you create it, students can click on that, and then they can reply, and they can reply to one another.
So you only have to open up forum once and then just keep adding topics.
You can, yeah. It's up to you whether you want to do, maybe quarterly, depending on how many you're doing. If you're doing a lot of them, I would say maybe kind of break them up, or maybe by unit, or however you might organize your class page.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like I'm going to go off the rails a little bit here. It looks like they added some stuff, so curious to see. Oh, LTI tools. We might finally be able to link some things into Sapphire. That's new.
That was going to be my next question. Is there any way to link this to like your unit HyperDoc?
Directly? You mean the Sapphire forum?
Yeah. In other words, if you had this as part of your unit plan where they're going through things, and then one of them would be a link to this, or you would just have to describe where it is, and they had to go back to their class page themselves. Yeah,
for that, John, because you can't link it directly, I would probably do, like, in my task list, I would probably add a line, reply to discussion forum and Sapphire submission method.
Okay, right. All right.
Something like that. Yeah. There's no way to go directly there, unfortunately.
Ryan, can you, you know how when we have them drop something in Dropbox and Sapphire, you go in and you could see the order of the students there and who's actually submitted it, who has not. Is there a way to do that, especially if you make it mandatory that they have to participate at least something in the discussion board if you're going to use it as a grade?
In forum?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I still have?
I mean, like you could have a class, like pull a class up as an example, because I can remember being able to see it because this was the first time I was using Sapphire's Dropbox. And I mean, I thought that was great that you could see, well, this person turned it in, this person hasn't turned it in. And I could at least let the student know in case they sent it and it just didn't go through, hey, you didn't send me this.
Yeah, and they do. I was looking to see if I still had a student response. No, I don't think so. But yeah, you would, if you click on the number, it would have the students in the class.
And then they'd have the how many times they posted and stuff. Okay.
Within that
Right.
forum, or within that topic, actually.
Okay.
So this was like the second line, as we may think, this was related to an essay they had to do. It was just general questions. They weren't required to post, but if they did, you know, I would see one if each one of them posted once. Now this doesn't separate whether it was a comment on another student or their own original post. So for that, you would have to verify, you know, because a student could go through and comment on 3 other students, you know, and they might not have done
Can
their
you
own.
limit the number of posts, like how many times there you can come up with that number and say, well, you can post as many as 3 times, at least 2 of your own and 1 on somebody else's project? Can you do that? I mean, I guess you can put that in your requirements, but can you do that? Can you limit the number that they're allowed to post?
No, there's no limitation or anything for that. You would just have to put the text in there and, you know, hope they read.
Yeah, good luck with that, right? Thanks.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions on the forums while I'm here?
No, thanks for a tip there.
Sure. Okay. All right. So for summative, you know, these are the bigger projects and presentations and end of chapter tests and those sorts of things, just to make sure that the students learned everything we wanted them to learn. So there are some tools out there, online test builders. Sapphire's is pretty good, and we used it pretty effectively at the end of last year, you know, for online testing. As far as productivity tools go, you know, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they each have their own suite of tools. So you have Docs, Sheets, and Slides, you have PowerPoint, Word, and Excel, you know, that idea. So students could use those for a lot of different projects or presentations or anything like that. iMovie would be another one for students to create movies. VoiceThread I had mentioned here, and that's one where students can actually create a presentation either in Google Slides or maybe in PowerPoint and upload that presentation to VoiceThread, and VoiceThread allows them to add voice comments to the presentation. So that was something that some teachers did. You know, usually they had a big, you know, end of year project where the students had to put together a slideshow and then present it to the class. And what they did was they had the students use VoiceThread to take that same presentation and create it the same way they would have done it before, but then just add those voice comments like they would have presented. So, you know, that was a little bit more on the asynchronous side where the students created that ahead of time, and then the teacher watched it when they had time, or, you know, if they wanted other students to watch it. But if you wanted to do more of a live, like a standard presentation, students have access to Google Meet and Zoom. So that would be another option if they aren't obviously, you know, physically in the classroom to do that. Students could pull up their presentation, and if you gave them the ability, could share their screen just like I'm doing now and share a slideshow and do a presentation this way. Obviously not ideal, but it is an option for them. So, and again, these are just 2 tools. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can accomplish the same thing. You know, students could use iMovie, students could use the screen recording app on their iPad to create a video. There's a lot of different ways, and there's really no one way that's better than another.
iBooks, right? You use iBooks, I guess.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that, you know, really I would say that if you were going to ask what the best way was, whatever the easiest thing is for the students to do. And that may change based on grade level, you know. As far as authentic assessment goes, this can be a lot of different things, but it's a lot of the students, creating, doing, some kind of active thing. And, any way that you can connect it to the real world is great. The ideas of looking at case studies, or some kind of simulations or labs or anything like that. Consulting and internships are another option. Obviously, probably not going to happen as much in the current climate, but that is something that we do offer to some students. And then portfolios as another form of assessment. But I have this list here of all these what we would consider authentic tasks, and there's a ton of them. I'm not going to read through all these, but the link is there, and when I share the presentation, you can go through these, different ideas, different types of assessments that are out there. But it basically breaks down into these three categories: constructed response, where the students respond to a prompt, use their knowledge to construct an answer; essays, lab reports, those kinds of things that we do already. The product, so the students are creating or producing something, and then the performance, the students are doing something, conducting experiments or some debates, different ideas like that. So that's the biggest difference between authentic versus traditional. Traditional is your typical tests and quizzes, whereas authentic is just a lot more active. So as far as tools go, the only one I wanted to mention here was Start Soul, which I have talked about before, and I did a training on it last year, and some of you may have been there, but this it stands for Self-Organized Learning Environment. And basically, you as a teacher, you come up with one big question that you want the students to examine, do their own research. You can set parameters for group sizes, you can set parameters for time limits, but it's all intended to occur within one single 45-minute class period. And you give the students a prompt, they go out, they do the research, they construct an answer, and then they present it to the class. And then there's a little bit of time at the end for discussion, debate, or whatever it might be. And you can control it. They have their own app. It's all totally free. It's people out of Ohio and Western Pennsylvania developed it. And right now that's most of their market is just training teachers in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And, this is something that's really easy to use and set up. And, it's your whole lesson for the day. And it's really easy for the students to kind of follow along. They're not really locked into this app. They go out to the web, or if you give them resources to research, and they can use all that. And the reason why I wanted to mention it is they also created a virtual version where you can do all of the same things, but within their own little platform. And they use something a little bit different than Zoom. I think it's called Big Blue Button, but it's the same kind of video recording software. So that could be an option too, if we have to, that they have that virtual for the students to interact and research and do all those great things. All right, as far as traditional tests and quizzes go, I mentioned Sapphire's Test Builder before. I'll answer questions if anybody has them about the Test Builder. I don't want to go into a big full training on that right now, because that would take probably at least an hour to go through all the different features that they have, but definitely we'll answer questions if anybody has any. And then Google Forms for quizzes too. Definitely not as many control features in Google Forms as Sapphire, so I wouldn't use this for too many high stakes types of quizzes, but just maybe short quizzes or something like that.
Use it for self-assessment, right? For students to self-assess, well, this is what I might need to study for the test tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah. Or if you do like that, a lot of people have been talking lately about the flipped classroom model, where the students go home and they watch a video, come in, and they do the interactive part in classroom.
Okay.
Google Forms would be an easy way to make sure that they watch the video and they understand before starting the next part. Low grades, small assignments, that kind of thing.
Just take the barometer type of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't make a 100-point test in Google Forms. That's what I'm getting at there. And then as far as, traditional assessment, like I said, we've been doing this forever, so I'm not going to, spend too much time. But I did put together some tips and ideas on, question types and writing good questions and that kind of stuff, just as a resource. So it's there if anybody wants to take a look at it. All right. And it's just like difference between good question stems, bad question stems, and that kind of stuff. All right. So this is always the big question, and I buried it deep in the presentation when it comes to online tests. What about cheating? And it's a tough one, and there's really no good answer. But I heard of a conversation with a freshman or maybe second year student in college, and their school closed. They came home and they were taking a test online, but they were using their textbook. They were using Google to answer the questions, and they were asked, don't you realize that that's cheating? And initially they kind of gave the tongue-in-cheek answer about using their resources, but when they pressed them on it a little bit, the student replied with something to the effect of, all through school, I was told I have to be the best, I have to get good grades, I have to do the work, I have to do all this stuff. And I know that everybody else in my class is doing this right now, cheating, looking up the answers. Why would I penalize myself and get a lower grade than them by being honest? And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I just found it very interesting, the thought process there. And I don't think that that's always the case. But it does, it's a tough nut to crack, because it is so easy to look up answers or whatever it might be. And it seems like every time they think of something to do, there's another loophole, there's another way around it. So that becomes then, okay, what's a reasonable expectation? What are things that we can do? So one thing is the question banks, as you've been teaching, and this is tougher for newer teachers who haven't been teaching as long and are just developing their first or second tests. But as you've been teaching a while, maybe start to develop banks of questions that are asked differently, and use that to help create different versions of the test. And that's always tough, because it's always tough to make sure that the test is equally challenging to all separate sections of a class. And if you're teaching 5 sections of a class, of the same class, it's tough to think of 5 different tests. So in that case, the idea of randomizing question order and answer order can be helpful. Again, with modern technology and the ability to take a picture, and randomizing the question order doesn't solve all those problems. And randomizing the answer order can be tough, just because you have to be careful of the questions you ask, or the answer choices you provide, rather, like both B and C are correct. Well, if you randomize the answer order, B and C could be anything. So you just have to be aware of that when designing the questions. Some schools have found this effective using honor statements. Colleges have been doing this a lot lately too. At the beginning of the test, before they, like, as their first page of the test, they have just a text block that has the school honor statement, just as a reminder. The students have to read it before they go on. And then at the end, they have like a verification page where they say, I acknowledge that, I received no help, or something like to that effect. Again, not really preventing anything, hopefully guilting some kids into being honest. And, the biggest thing is varying the assessment types. So, in an online world, maybe giving more of those, authentic or, formative assessments, like those kinds of things that are more student created, where they can't necessarily go out and get the answers quickly. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to catch plagiarism than it is to catch cheating on a multiple choice test. So varying those assessment types can help with that a little bit as well. Discussion boards are another one if you give students credit for the discussion boards. So like I said, it's not an easy answer, and I wish I had a better answer than that, but you know, a lot of it is just what can we realistically do to mitigate it and kind of go from there. So
Brian, are we still looking into that program that would sort of prevent that? And then maybe Diane could answer that too. I forget what you called it. I remember you saying something about it, but where we could use that, but that it would maybe try to prevent it, like what the universities use. I mean, it's not going to stop it completely. You're never going to be able to stop it completely, but at least sort of prevent them a little better.
yeah,
Are
well,
you talking about Turnitin?
yeah, we're looking at
I
Turnitin.
couldn't remember the name of it.
Yeah, so Turnitin will be used for like text-based essays, any kind of like writing like that the students create. It'll run it through a database and compare it to other things on the web, text on the web, and stuff like that. It'll also check it against other students' work.
Yes, the virtual high school, the VHS classes, they have Turnitin, and it's great. You just highlight a phrase or whatever, and it tells you if it's been copied and what the source is and so forth. For writing activities, yeah, it's a great source.
Good.
I have a quick question. Did
Sure,
you
John.
get any feedback? I know some teachers tried to test with the students being on Zoom at the same time.
Yeah,
Did you get any feedback on that? Is that a worthwhile option?
that is a model out there, and the one teacher I know of who did that said that it worked pretty effectively. But that depends on a couple things. You know, they sent a test at a specific time. The students had to print it out and work on it in front of the iPad with Zoom, and then take a picture of it and submit it, or scan it and submit it, however they did it. But they were the higher level seniors, very motivated, and they were okay. I don't know if that would be an easy thing for, you know, 9th grade students to do. So I think that might be a know your audience kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's for English because we just basically assigned essays, and you know, we expect you to use quotes, so you get to use your book, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, for us it's a slightly different issue, thankfully.
One other thing I wanted to mention about the question banks, for the textbook publishers, that's just one thing to be careful of. They're not the most secure anymore, and it's pretty easy to find those answers online a lot of times. So, you know, if possible, where possible, to kind of tweak them a little bit, or, you know, create your own questions. Mix them up, but don't depend solely on the textbook publisher for the question banks. It's too easy now to find that stuff online. All right, on that happy note. So feedback, I mentioned this before, but just the idea of, you know, a lot of these different types of assessments, formative, but even summative and authentic, you know, for the students, for working towards learning goals, for improving, the feedback that they get either from peers or from you as a teacher is very important to that process, that learning process. And with certain tools, it can be even easier. So the idea of a test builder in Sapphire or Google Forms, you know, students can answer the questions, and then at the end they can get feedback. You can actually put feedback in with each of those questions to show the students why answer A is correct, but the other answers are incorrect. So for students who get those questions wrong, they can get that quick kind of immediate feedback, and that can be really nice. The same concept is how we used to go over tests with the students in classroom, you know, once all the students have taken the test and that kind of thing. But you can do that online as well. And then with different things like, you know, the commenting features in Google Docs or Slides or anything like that, you can highlight a section, and then you can click this little button here. You can even highlight just a word, but then you can add a little comment out here for the students. Or if you do, I see Bob Bernier first, so if I do an @ and start typing his email address, now I can tag Bob Bernier, and if I want to assign it to him, he'll get an email notification that I typed a little message in here for him. So, when you're doing that on maybe an essay or something, you're not going to want to do that little tag every single time. Otherwise, a student might get 50 emails from you. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But, maybe at the very end, if you just give general feedback, you also have the option to switch. Like right now, I'm in editing mode, but I can also go to suggesting. And in suggesting, I can, if I go highlight that word and hit backspace, it'll put a line through it, and it'll let the student know I'm suggesting to delete that. Or if I want them to add, let's say like 2 spaces after a period or something like that, I can make those changes and type just like I would be editing it, but I wouldn't actually be changing their work. Or I could add a little comment to it too, and explain the rationale or something like that. And one other thing I wanted to mention was that idea of a comment. If you do this on your iPad, when the keyboard pops up at the bottom, there's the little microphone button in the bottom left corner. You can actually do speech to text. So you could just verbally say, whatever it is. If you have this big paragraph, rather than sit there and type it all out, you could just say it out loud, and it'll pick up pretty accurately. You might want to go back and proofread, but for the most part, it might save you some time, especially if you're going through a lot of these. So those comments and things can be really good for giving feedback to the students as well for those kinds of tools. All right, and then as far as, for the students to assess themselves, to see how they're doing, or even if they're going to peer review each other, something like that, rubrics, checklists, task sheets, help them kind of break down those bigger projects into smaller pieces. And then rubrics definitely allow them to see how they're going to be assessed. So that gives them the opportunity to kind of go through and say, okay, did I meet these requirements? Yes or no? If no, now I have to go back and change them if I want a good grade. All right, and with everything, I'm going to end with my little Zen teaching philosophy about balance. I think with everything in education, balance is really important, but with assessment especially. So, not to go too heavy on one type. Authentic assessment sounds great, but at the same time, if you're teaching American history and the kids leave your classroom and don't know what important document was signed in 1776, that's a problem. So they do need those facts, that repetition, some of that kind of foundational material. And we do have to test that. And sometimes the best way to test and make sure they know that is with quizzes and tests and that kind of thing. So I would never say, totally eliminate one type, but my suggestion would be to just kind of find some sort of balance and give students the ability to kind of create and have some of those authentic assessments at the same time, that you're also doing tests and quizzes and different assessment there as well. All right. But that was all I had for today. So if you have any questions or anything like that, let me know, and I'll try my best to answer them.